third program of our 2020 Lunch and Learn series. The blessed month of Ramadan is about to begin, a time when every Muslim is encouraged to ask him or herself what Ramadan means, when we take stock of our actions over the previous year, when we contemplate the lives of the Prophet ﷺ and his wives and his companions and consider what we can learn from their examples about how to lead a good life. Our guest today, Ms. Salma Hasan Ali, is an LLSP alumna, class of 2010, and secretary of the board of KARAMAH. She is vice president and chief inspiration officer for Kind Works, a DC area nonprofit that organizes opportunities for busy people to participate in community building volunteer activities. She's also vice chair of the Concordia Forum, a by invitation global network of leaders from Muslim backgrounds. In addition to these volunteer activities, Salma has her own storytelling consulting practice, where she helps individuals, nonprofits, and businesses to tell their stories. And as if that was not enough, she has a website, www.salmahasanali.com, that is filled with beautiful examples of her work as a writer and storyteller. I strongly recommend that you visit Salma's website to find inspiring stories of ordinary people making the world better, one good deed at a time. So Salma, tell me how you came about to write a daily Ramadan blog in the first place.
Well, first, thank you so much for that beautiful introduction, and thank you for the invitation to join you all. It is a pleasure and an honor to be here. I think before I start talking about the Ramadan blog, which is called 30 Days, 30 Deeds, I need to take a step back and really perhaps fill you in on how I got involved in storytelling to begin with. About 10 years ago, I wanted to write the story of how my family came to this country from Pakistan and what that experience was like as a 7-year-old. I took a writing class because it's not often that we just sit down and one day decide that we're going to write our family story. So I needed some discipline, a homework assignment, someone to keep me accountable. So I took a writing class, a personal essay writing class. I sat my parents down one day. I interviewed my dad in particular and asked him that experience. And he shared this story, which I had never heard before, about how we came to New York. We landed at JFK Airport. We're waiting in the taxi line, 2 kids, myself and my brother, my mom and dad. My dad has a short-term consulting contract. And here we've arrived in America. And a cab pulls up, he tosses our suitcases in the trunk, and my dad turns to him and says, "We've just arrived here. Take us to a neighborhood that you think will be suitable." And so began our journey in America. It was random and arbitrary and, you know, interesting for me to record so that my kids would know where they're coming from and so that my parents would know that I get it. I get the sacrifice. I get all that you did to make the life that I have now possible for me. And that was it. I had no intention of publishing it. I didn't want to share it beyond just our immediate family. So I wrote that story, I handed it in to my teacher, and I shared it with a friend. And the friend read it and said, "This is interesting," sent it to the Washingtonian. And for those of you on this call who are from DC, you know that the Washingtonian is a well-respected, well-read magazine. And I thought, why would they be interested? It's my ordinary story. Why is there a connection to the Washingtonian? But I figured I've written it, I have nothing to lose. I chose an editor off the masthead and I pressed send. And I figured I'm not going to hear from them, but I've sort of done my part. But 3 days later, the editor did call me and said, "Salma, we're interested in this story. We want to publish it." So it was the first time that the Washingtonian actually published a story about a Muslim family. And it was exciting to see our story represented in a magazine like this that's widely read. And what happened afterwards is really what changed my life and the trajectory of what I do and made me into a storyteller, because I started getting emails email after email after email. It filled up 16 pages, and with a similar sentiment. And the sentiment was this, that finally we get to meet a Muslim family as if we were sharing a cup of tea together. And it made me realize then that our stories are powerful. There is so much that we can connect over by just sharing what we feel is an ordinary story, because it's our humanity that's our bond, beyond anything else that may separate us or divide us or make us different from one another. We are all human beings, and it's our hopes and fears and dreams and challenges that connect us. So I'll just read to you one response I got, just to give you an idea of the type of the types of emails I was getting. I was struck with how similar you and your faith and values are to my family. I'm a Jewish woman who grew up in Cleveland, but my grandparents and their families were from all over Europe. They too came to America when their respective countries had civil and political strife. Your struggles are identical to ours in terms of our wanting to pass on traditions, the need to worry about perceptions from the public, and the trials and tribulations of raising our children and grandchildren in terms of passing on core values, traditions, and faith. I realize that people from all over the world have more similarities than differences, and your writing brings that to light. You know, our stories humanize. They help us start a relationship. They encourage us to trust one another. And so that first story, which was never supposed to be published, got me thinking about this power that we each have, because we each have our stories to share. So I started sharing personal stories, sometimes about myself, my family, but mostly about other inspiring, ordinary and extraordinary Muslims that I wanted people to get to know through their story. One, for example, there's a absolutely extraordinary, he passed away recently, an extraordinary humanitarian named Edie, who lived in Pakistan. He is somebody that the entire world should know about. They say that he was the Mother Teresa of Pakistan, but really he's the Edie of Pakistan.
Maybe she's the Edie of India.
It has to be, but, you know, so I went to Pakistan, I interviewed him, I learned about his incredible work. I interviewed his wife, who does amazing work as well, and started sharing stories like Edie's. There's another story that I shared, since we're just on the eve of Ramadan. A few years ago, I shared a story about, again, an ordinary day in the life of my family during the month of Ramadan. It was published in a widely read national women's magazine. A woman read it, a very devout Catholic woman. She went to a lot of trouble to track me down on social media, and she wrote to me and she said, I read your story and I was very moved, because all that I know about Islam previously is what I've seen on the headlines, what I hear in the news, what I hear my friends tell me, and it's all about violence and things that, you know, I knew not to be true, but it's your story, your human experience that really made me believe in Muslims as human beings, as opposed to the label that I see in the media. And then she said, I am terrified. Her daughter had just converted to Islam. She was a student. She found Islam, she converted to Islam, she started wearing the hijab. And previous to this, again, ordinary story, what she knew about Islam was negative, and it terrified her, as it would any mother. And reading this story about my family and how we celebrate the month and the traditions that we have and how we mix East and West, it gave her some hope. And this was, I think, about 7 years ago. And this woman, her name is Annette, we just met for the first time a few months ago.
In person.
But during the past 7 or 8 years, we have been on this journey together, where I've shared some resources. connected her to families of other people who've converted to Islam. And she's come to know the Islam through her daughter and through perhaps my friendship with her, that now she goes to church groups, to the media, to all sorts of gatherings and talks about the Islam that she knows to be true. This is the power of our stories. What we think are ordinary are powerful stories that help us connect with each other. So just giving you a little bit of context of why I know that our stories are so powerful. So I started this blog, again, an attempt, initially it was for family and community and that's it. But if you have something compelling to share or something human to share, and perhaps if you share it in a way that speaks to other people's hearts, things just spread. And particularly on social media, if it's something moving or touching, it has a way to reach a lot of people. And that's what happened with this blog. I started about 9 years ago. And I wanted, at the time, my kids were young, they weren't fasting necessarily, but I wanted them to know what Ramadan is really about, beyond not just eating and drinking.
Do you remember about what ages they were when you started this blog?
7, I think 6, perhaps 6 or 7, and my daughter was probably 11 or so. So just starting to think about fasting, but it wasn't a regular part of their monthly practices yet. And so I wanted to teach them that it's about so much more. It's about being good, doing good, caring more, being our best selves. So that first year we decided we would do one good deed each day. So, and then we'd come home, we'd blog about it, just a few sentences, nothing earth-shattering. We'd send it out to our family, our extended family, our neighbors. So that first year, the blog was 30 days, 30 deeds, and that's what the title has been ever since. And we did some deeds in our community, helping our neighbors, or planting a tree, or serving dinner at a shelter. But a lot of the good deeds were also just within our home, within our family. My parents were visiting, and my kids would sit with them and hear their stories. They would inevitably make them smile. And I shared with them that smiling is a form of charity, making somebody smile. So sort of letting them know the values of our faith, that you don't have to change the world to do good. You can just impact one person, make their day better, and that's charity. That's a good deed. So we blogged about it, we shared it, and it seemed to resonate with the few dozens of people that read it. The next year we decided to do it again. And this year the theme was 30 days, 30 gratitudes. One gratitude each day. And again, I would blog, the kids would blog, I'd get other family members. And slowly, over the course of 9 years, this simple project has found its way to every corner of the world, from Azerbaijan to Zimbabwe. And it's found its way to Muslims and non-Muslims and atheists alike. And I think, again, it's the power of the human story, of the human connection, of sharing what's important to us. I mean, gratitude is universal. Doing good is universal. Traditions are universal. These are the themes that we've had. We've done 30 traditions, 30 du'as, 30 inspiring stories, 30 refugee stories. Last year, we did 30 wisdoms from our elders. And these are things that everyone can connect about. They can share from their own experiences, from their own faith traditions, their own cultural backgrounds. So that's a little bit about the 30 Days, 30 Deeds blog, which I am very busy working on this eve of Ramadan, because it will launch again. After this call, I'll be posting the theme for this year's blog.
Well, we'll talk about that in a minute. I'm curious to know, do your children still contribute to your 30 Days blog? Do they ever provide a reflection or a wisdom or gratitude?
Yes, they do.
They do. MashaAllah.
Yes. When they were younger, I could sort of insist on it. As they become older, one has now graduated from college, the other one is heading off to college, inshallah. That insistence is is not there anymore, but they do contribute in different ways. So they, for example, in the gratitude, certainly they wrote letters to their grandparents. And now, for example, their contribution is, yesterday, my son helped me make the video, which is the introduction to this blog. And my daughter is a photographer. She provides a lot of the photographs that I use in the blog. For example, the theme of 30 refugee stories. My daughter and I traveled to refugee camps. We were in Lesbos and Athens in Greece. We went to Amman in Jordan. We together have captured these refugee stories. She takes the most extraordinary photographs. In fact, the photos behind me are many of her pictures. I'm sitting in my dining room at home, yes. And this is her photo gallery. So they're a part of it in different ways now than writing.
So it's still a family project.
Yes.
And how about other collaborators? Do you have any other collaborators who have contributed to your 30 Days blog? From time to time, maybe not as regularly as your children.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, initially it was just sort of the three of us that would be posting. But then, it's quite a discipline as well to write every single day.
Indeed.
So then I broadened it, and someone who's on the call here, Maria from India, she's my niece.
And
an LLSP. She has contributed, as have other extended family members. It's become really a family project, a wider family project, and it's been so wonderful, particularly last year when we did wisdoms from our elders. To hear from my aunts and from my cousins and from friends and family near and far, what are the wisdoms that they cherish, that they remember from elders who are with us or perhaps who have passed on. I mean, it is, I can't imagine a more beautiful gift to have. And I'm thinking about my father, to talk about storytellers, he was the ultimate storyteller. He passed away just about a year ago. And it is such and so many of my posts each year revolve around his stories or his example, and certainly last year, sharing the wisdoms that I've learned from how he's lived his life. And I'm so grateful really to be a writer and storyteller, to have sat my father down all those many years ago, to hear the story of coming to America and other stories that he shared with me. And I've been able to share through my writing, because that's it. I mean, that's the gift that, will live on. We are all mortal, but our stories are what lives on and what gives our life meaning and what gives our legacy meaning. So really, for me, doing this work, as much as I hope it's providing some comfort or joy or sustenance to others, it's giving me really the biggest gift that I can give myself, which is a record of our life's history.
Well, from one daddy's girl to clearly another one, I'm sure both of our fathers are very proud of us.
Yes, I'm sure.
Inshallah. So before we get started with this month's 30 days, we talked about this earlier, and you told me you had an initial idea for the theme for this year, which turned out to be a little bit complicated. So tell us what you originally thought about in terms of a theme for this year, and then we'll talk about what your actual theme is going to be.
Sure. So I start sort of contemplating what the themes can be just a few months before, as ideas come to my mind. And I thought for this year, 30 days, 30 images would be something different. And the idea was to find photographers and to find images that reveal the essence of Islam, and ask each photographer, in their words, how a particular image shares what they feel is a value or an essence within the faith. And just having, a very visual blog, I thought would be something unique and interesting to do. But then just a couple of weeks ago, and this is a recent turn of events, with this COVID crisis that we're in the middle of, and hearing an ambassador in South Africa, He was the South African ambassador to Washington, D.C., someone who I got to know and respect greatly. He, his wife, his entire family. You know, we were on a Zoom conversation, and he was sharing the story of comparing this time of isolation with a previous time that he was in isolation. And that was during the apartheid era. He was an activist against apartheid. He was imprisoned, and for many months he was in solitary confinement. And he said there was one thing that he had with him at that time, and it was the Quran. And he disciplined himself in such a way that he taught himself to memorize parts of the Quran, his favorite verses. He would get up at Fajr and read in Arabic. Then he would, after lunch, read the Quran in English. And then after 3, he would index the Quran. So this is the only thing he had. He was in solitary confinement for so many months, and he made use of that time in the most profound way possible. And hearing that conversation, and of course his eloquence in telling it in such a moving way, it made me realize that right now, given the moment that we're in, hearing and sharing these reflections would be really very interesting. And I think what people might really take away from this, you know, we're all thinking about how to use this moment and how to move forward from this moment. You know, what can we do to learn from this solitude, from this quiet that we've been plunged inside? And how are we personally sort of reflecting on this moment? And Ramadan is so much about self-reflection. So to reveal the theme of this year's vlog, it's 30 days, 30 reflections for our times. And it will include Ambassador Rasul's reflection. I also heard a beautiful reflection. I was on another Zoom call with Imam Sohaib Webb, who's yes. And you know, in that conversation, he was talking about Jummah and Taraweeh and fasting and all the different fiqh rules around, you know, how to manage this time within our community of faith. But he also mentioned his daughter who was almost 1 year old. She was born about this time last Ramadan. And he mentioned just in passing that she had been quite ill when she was born. And at the end of the conversation, I asked him, you know, how would you explain this moment to your daughter when she's old enough to understand? And his response is a reflection for our times, because he said, you know, I'm going to tell her that she can do anything. She can be anything, because look at what she survived already. She was born with tubes in her body. She was plunged into a pandemic. She was quarantined, and she is going to be so resilient, and she's going to slay. Those were his words. And I love that. You know, I think these very personal reflections are moving, and I think will provide a lot of sustenance to all of us and help us think, you know, what is it that we want to take away from this time? How do we want to live our lives perhaps differently as we get out of this moment? And I think it'll help ground us. It'll help replenish us so we can figure out better how to help heal our world, inshallah.
Inshallah, Ya Rab. This is such a time when you really have to think about whether we're really on the right course, whether politically or in terms of how we're mistreating our environment, maybe also how we are willfully blind to the needs of our brothers and sisters because it's just too much trouble to have to do something about it. So maybe this is a good time for us to slow down and think about what we're doing and what we could do better. Well, you've made me reflective, Salma. Thank you very much. This has been both fascinating and inspiring. Maybe I'll start writing my own blog. Thank you so much for agreeing to let me interview you today. And for our listeners, if you're on Facebook, yes?
If I may just add one last thing.
Of course.
How to find the blog, if anybody on the call and others who see this might be interested. The best way to follow the blog, there's a Facebook page. It's called 30 Days, 30 Deeds on Facebook. So just follow or like that and you'll receive the posts. You can also follow me on Instagram, which is at Salma Hasan Ali. And as you mentioned, I have a website as well. So any of those places. And please do share the blog with your friends and family and continue to have it spread across the globe.
That would be lovely. In fact, I have been over to your website recently and I've also popped over to check on your Facebook page. So I can't wait for the first installment. And now for a quick closing plug. On the 28th of May, that is our next Lunch and Learn series, Mr. Abed Awad, a longtime member of the KARAMAH board and a distinguished attorney and scholar, will be talking to us about his Sharia Wiz project, an online platform that will allow any Muslim living in the United States who wishes to draw up a Sharia compliant will to do so. So I hope to see everybody there, including you, Salma, since you're an LLSP alumna. Well, and let me take this opportunity to wish everybody Ramadan Mubarak and, health, continued health and safety for all of us and all of our families, inshallah. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.